Am I the a-hole for cancelling a check of $12,000 that I wrote for my infertile friend for her next IVF cycle over a joke? Hello my snacks, welcome back. My name is Jack. In today's story, we learn that your words have consequences, essentially learning not to bite the hand that feeds you. I'm a 35-year-old female and I'm infertile. My ex-husband and I tried everything to have kids, but it just never happened. He divorced me, went and married someone younger who was able to give him a kid, and from what I can gather, they're expecting a second child together. It hurts like hell seeing someone else have what I couldn't. I get frustrated with myself sometimes, and with family blaming me for basically everything, I turn to my friends for support, especially Elisa. She's in the same infertility boat as me, but she and her husband are currently trying IVF, hoping it'd work. Alicia asked me to help pay for her upcoming IVF cycle. I agreed to write her a check of $12,000. I really wanted to help her, and the money came with no strings attached. I wrote the check and gave it to her last week. She was very appreciative of it. Such a grand gesture from OP. How do you think Alicia would take this, Well, the very next day, I got a sudden message from a mutual friend, Carol, with a screenshot of the conversation she had with Alicia. Turns out, she and Alicia were talking about the next IVF cycle, and Alicia said she hoped the cycle would work because she didn't want to end up divorced and having her husband go marry someone younger and have a baby with them and another one on the way, while she's alone and without a family at 35. She's 32. I was stunned and hurt. I knew she meant me here, but I did not confront her. I simply contacted my bank and canceled the check. In the evening, Alicia called to ask why I canceled the check, and I told her. She went batshit, saying she didn't mean it that way, and that she thought that this was somewhat an inside joke between desperate, infertile women. She came over with her husband the next day, begging I write another check, but I refused. Oh, come on, friend. When I bragged about the most horrible experience you had in your life as something I never want to experience and think that makes you less of a person for having to go through, I was saying it in jest. Anyway, give me the money, please. An argument ensued, and her husband thought I wasn't being supportive of her, like when she supported me throughout my struggles. Ma'am, what do you mean you don't want to support us after you've learned that we actually didn't really support you? Well, she left crying and we haven't talked since then. Her husband keeps reminding me, while repeatedly calling Carol a toxic snake, of the date of the next cycle, saying they can't have it after I took the money that was supposed to pay for it back. Interesting that I can't afford the $12,000. Let's just, what's the current data saying as to how much it costs to raise a child here? 300,000. Oh, 18,000 a year on average. Okay, all right.
Why are you trying to have a baby if you can't even afford the IVF?
Some friends think I'm being oversensitive. Carol's on my side, telling me to tell them to go to hell, but I feel so bad about it. What I've done might just damage our 15 years of friendship. Maybe I shouldn't have cancelled it, but I just felt so offended by what she said about me and how she basically mocked my unfortunate circumstances. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole? Now, some things I think we should consider here. One, yes, I am making the point that if you can't afford $12,000 for an IVF, how can you afford a child that's $18,000 a year, blah, blah, blah. That is obviously dependent on average, and that number can easily change depending on who you are, where you're living. And of course, that's $18,000 over a year. This is them needing $12,000 straight away. Again, an understandable difference there. Also, let's read that quote again. She didn't want to end up divorced and having a husband go marry someone younger and having a baby with them and another one on the way while she's alone and without a family at 35. Personally, I feel this is something where it requires the context of the whole conversation to better understand how malicious it truly was. Because in a way, it kind of sounds like she's just stating the facts here. That is what happened. But also, does make it sus that she isn't just being openly honest about the fact that, hey, yeah, I don't want to be like my friend. I love them, but I don't want to have the same unfortunate life that they're having. But then also, what kind of man are you with if you're afraid of this? You're afraid he's going to run off, so you think if you have a child with him, he won't be an a-hole who could leave you? I'm sorry, but many men have already done that. There's a reason there's the term single mama. Like, some of the comments are divided, and they say things such as this, agreeing that Carol is a toxic snake. She could have just confronted Alicia about the inside joke herself. Instead, she goes on pretending to be her friend, while forwarding messages to you that she knows will be crushing to you. That kind of behavior is gross. Further arguing that no, I don't read it as mocking you, I read it as her being absolutely terrified and insecure. That's where her mind goes because she is afraid of abandonment. And look, to be honest, I can see what they're talking about there. Maybe her husband has given her a reason to be afraid of that. He does sound like the guilt-tripping type based on how he is treating you, but her comment strikes me as more gallows humor than mockery. But it's still an awful thing to say. She would never say it to your face, precisely because she knows it's an awful thing to say. She should be profoundly apologetic. Meanwhile, the top comments are more vindicative in mind. Nata, it was a cruel thing to do with her, especially after you are being so gracious towards them. By the way, just a reminder, your worth is not connected to your ability to bear children. They don't even wear shoes. And they just spend the winter months sleeping all the time. It's so annoying. With more people agreeing to this, that yay, may God bless Carol. She saved OP. Years do not mean anything when friends act like this friend and her husband, trying to guilt trip OP. It does continue on about the criticizing of financial affordability when it comes to IVFing, and you should just adopt instead. But someone does bring up a comment themselves that I'll just leave here on the screen for you all, talking about that, yeah, adoption is not the easy solution you seem to think it is. But with that said, let's move on to the update, just a little quick one. Hello again, and wow, thank you so much for all this support and compassion that you've shown me. I could feel it through my screen. I have decided I'm going to put some distance between me and Alicia. Things have been rough lately, and I think that distance is what I need right now, especially for my mental health. After reading some comments here, I now feel less heavy and more relieved. Doesn't change the fact that I'm still feel completely and utterly shocked by Alicia's behavior. It's a shame having to come to realization that even those who are supportive of you the most could cause this much harm. And yeah, seems to be a popular opinion that this was a case of Natar. And a good point here, let the friends calling you sensitive open their checkbooks. Though I would argue that we have the right to criticize someone's actions or decisions on things without having to immediately take up the mantle just because we don't think they did the right thing. I can argue that I think a police officer didn't do their job right while not having to end up as a police officer myself. But with all that information in front of you, do you still think that they are Natar? Maybe think no a-holes here, maybe think it's kind of blown out of proportion? Do you think Carol truly is a snicky? For now though, let's move on. We move on now to the tale of a man who's on the complete opposite end of the generosity spectrum. Am I the a-hole for yelling at my husband for making my daughter feel bad? So my oldest daughter, who I'll call May, is 16. She has a job, has had it for about 5 months. Out of all the children, she's the most mature. She's also good at saving, but she rarely spends money on things she enjoys and instead keeps it in her bank account. My husband wanted to have her start paying her phone bill immediately. It would have been $50 monthly, but I said no, and eventually compromised to the beginning of October. A note, my husband, her stepfather, is very money tight, and he tells her to pay for everything she wants. Now, I agree with this somewhat, as she should be monetarily responsible so she's ready for college, but he wants her to pay for everything. Anytime she asks for something, he'll respond with, "You have money? Buy it yourself." Now, fast forward to today. May has been out of town on a trip with her class, and she was going to be gone for a week. Because this is a national event that happens every year and they're in the city, everything is very expensive. She has a credit card. She has a credit card at 16 under her name that is connected to my account. And I said she could use it for her meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But snacks and souvenirs she would have to buy on her own. Okay, slight false alarm that it's in your name as well, OP, but oh my god, giving a 16-year-old a credit card. Look at this dad go teaching financial responsibility by forcing her to use a system that literally has a no ceiling in terms of monetary spending. Daughter, I'm not letting you ride this bike until you're off the training wheels. Anyway, here's the keys to my Ferrari, just gonna leave them here. She called earlier and we were talking while my husband was in the room. She started complaining about how everything was expensive and she was jokingly saying that she was going to go bankrupt once she returned from her trip. I told her not to worry about it, and if she needed, she could use her credit card for whatever. Then, my husband pipes in and says,
"Stop guilting your mother to give you money. Whatever you want, you can buy it yourself."
She was quiet for a moment before saying that she wasn't asking for anything, and then he repeated,
"Don't guilt your mother. How can you be morally okay with that?
Damn, Dad, what an ironic question. She said she wasn't calling to ask for money, that she just wanted to complain and that she was going to hang up. I took her off speaker to tell her it was fine, but she just swore up and down that she wasn't trying to guilt me and that she was just going to pretend the call never happened and that it was fine. And then she hung up. I was so mad. I yelled at him, told him he was being ridiculous and that she was still a child. I left before he could respond. I'm still angry. She apologizes to me every time she buys a meal because she thinks it's too much. I've noticed that she buys her own breakfast and only spends money on lunch and dinner even though I've said she can do all three. I'm angry and I don't know what to do. Am I the a-hole? This is one of those stories where you really got to question not so much if they are the a-hole, but what experience do they have around their partner and just life in general that they think they need to question if they're in the wrong about this at all. Like they believe that, well, because they yelled at their husband harshly after he made the daughter feel guilty, maybe that they're the a-hole because there's a possibility she's biased since, you know, it's her own daughter, her flesh and blood. So far, the biggest comment is really trying to hammer the points to the OP here that she is 16. In case it isn't clear. No, is it clear, everyone? Can we see here? Can you tell they're 16? What in the Scrooge McFlick is this? I agree that a kid should learn financial responsibility before venturing out into the wide world of banks and insurance companies, but give me a freaking break. You are parents, and that comes with certain obligations that your miserly husband needs a serious reality check about. No 16-year-old should need to pinch every penny and worry about where she's going to find the money to buy things for school, for God's sake. And while we're on the subject, if she's so mature and diligent and is working so hard to save up for the things in her future, why are you so damn reluctant to invest in her present? I'd understand, well, a little, your attitude if she was wasteful and thoughtless with her money, but surely she's demonstrated how responsible she is by now. And surely you buy nice things for yourself or for your husband? Like, why is your daughter not valuable enough to be worthy of a little generosity? Also, I hate your husband.
Wow, no, what, really? No.
Ask that man how he can be morally okay with lashing out at his daughter for the grave sin of needing her parents' help. Ask how he can be morally okay with prioritizing his frugality over his relationship with his, stepdaughter. Ask how he can be morally okay with constantly assuming the worst of her and ascribing malice, greed, or manipulation to her, completely unprovoked. Ask him the last time he said something kind to her. And yes, that is the common theme with a lot of these comments. This daughter clearly shows that she is a very mature woman for her age, especially financially, but the stepdad just can't comprehend it.
No, it's not possible. Because when I was in high school, I had very bad luck with women, so I'm gonna project my failings onto this stepdaughter. Yep. Probably not true at all, but screw it. Everyone's attacking the man, and I want to feel a part of the good crowd.
But hey, let's beg the question. Can we see anyone on the other side of the fence? Some people would argue that this isn't the stepfather's own fault. This is your fault as well as being an equal parent in this relationship. Hell, being the more biological parent, if anything. One also tries to argue that this is a case of not so much a controlling creep, but, well, different people, often highly dependent on their upbringings, have very different relationships with money. For some, no matter how comfortable they become, money will always be a major stressor because it was a stressor when they were young. If you don't know, you don't know, so don't judge.
You hear that, everyone? We're not allowed to judge anymore on this subreddit. That is literally about getting judgment.
And after only 3 people disliked this comment, well, wow, I was spot on. A whole bunch of people who clearly don't understand how being poor can warp a person. Everyone's just calling him horrible. It's like that old saying, 2's a company, 3's a massive stadium. But I have to agree with these people here in the sense that, okay, if it's warping a person, then that person needs help. You don't project that onto a 16-year-old girl. Shame on you. Like, okay, person with my name and then other weird other letters after it. I get what they say where this is a case where hating someone isn't going to change the situation and really help it. And we should actually understand where he's coming from before we administer the punishment. And I would agree to that if he wasn't pushing this sort of logic and fear onto other people like this that is causing them to possibly be starving at some point. When your actions, especially as a parent, are affecting the psychological health of your children, yeah, you deserve the hate. And now for the text-based version of putting your hand in a crocodile's mouth and then crying to Steve Irwin for not stopping you from putting your hand in a crocodile's mouth. Am I the a-hole for not letting my brother-in-law eat my dog food? So my sister and her husband are living with me temporarily because of Hurricane Ian. Their home in Fort Myers is in bad shape. So I agreed to let them stay with me and my dogs. I own a nice bungalow and it's just me and my dogs. It's a little crowded, but I can deal. I have a couple of little dogs, and I like to make them raw food. It's healthy for them, and I like knowing what they are eating. I use cheap ground meat, and I mixed in chopped up vegetables, seeds, and organ meat. I also mix in their doggy vitamins. I make up big batches whenever I find ground meat at a good price. Then I make patties out of the mix and freeze them. At night, I take out a couple of patties and leave them in the fridge to thaw out for the next day's food. Well, when I was out yesterday, my brother-in-law saw the hamburgers in my fridge and decided to grill them up and eat them. Oh, how nice. He thought he was entitled to the food. Can already tell he sounds like a great housemate. When I got home, I went to feed my dogs, but the food was obviously not there. So I asked my sister if she had fed my dogs while I was out. She said that her husband had eaten the burgers in the fridge. I kind of giggled and said, oops, I guess I need to thaw more out. He heard me and said they tasted off anyway. I told him the reason they tasted off is because they were dog food. He started dry heaving and saying he was going to puke. He yelled at me for keeping dog food around people food.
Oh, how was I supposed to know that meat that dogs eat looks exactly like the meat that humans eat?
I'm just a freaking idiot. I yelled back that he is a guest, and while he is welcome to anything in the house, perhaps it would be best if he asked before he ate my food. Him and my sister are angry at me that I didn't label my dog food. I am kind of angry that he complained. Yes, I would be a little grossed out too, but it's just funny. He isn't hurt or anything. Oh, not physically, but absolutely psychologically. Ooh, his masculinity is challenged. There is nothing that isn't edible by humans in the food I make. I would not eat it myself, of course. But regardless, am I the a-hole? A quick thing to note before we judge, though. Edit, part of the reason he is angry is because he says I took it lightly. All I did was joke that he would have a nice shiny coat.
So what you're saying is it's a good thing to eat it.
Gonna look fresh and fine on the catwalk. I assume this is something that was brought up after the initial reaction of them complaining about having dog food and human food in the same space. Like, okay, man, wow. Do you mistake soap dispensers for syrup as well or something? Like, what's going on here, buddy? But I imagine with this updated context, it's more of a case he's upset that he felt he was worried that he was possibly poisoned because obviously you don't eat dog food. So the real question we should ask is, are they the a-hole for how lightly they took it and possibly were just mocking him about it? Well, top comment says, and of course it's a dog photo, I'd lean toward Natar, because if I saw newly thawed patties in someone's fridge, I'd assume it was their dinner plan for themselves and I wouldn't touch it. So to me, this is kind of what he gets for eating what anyone would assume was your dinner. Yeah, Natar, but even if you have a you can eat whatever policy, I would never just grill up obviously prepped burger patties from my host's fridge. Like, that's impolite to me because someone, who is not you, prepped them and meant to eat them, and then you just come in and decide to grill them up without asking? It's just rude. But the fact that it was meant for the dogs is hilarious and should be a lesson learned. Yeah, who eats up someone's thawing meat? There wasn't enough out for everyone. That's inconsiderate. Yeah, plus, like, have they not noticed OP's routine at all? Just OP always puts out these meat patties, but never eats hamburgers. But her dogs eat this meaty food every day. Others do have to argue, though, nah, gave him permission to eat the food in the fridge, so he's not an a-hole for eating food in the fridge. But you're not an a-hole for keeping your dog's special food in the fridge. He's also not an a-hole for being upset to have eaten dog food. Now, I do agree that since this is now a shared fridge, things need to be kept labeled, and also marked with dates so older stuff isn't overlooked and left to spoil. Given that you do let them eat from your fridge, good information will let them be better guests. Labels like dog food for dinner tonight, don't eat, etc., let them enjoy your hospitality without inadvertently inconveniencing you. And I'd have to say, with that opinion, I kinda see this more being a no a-holes here. Like, yes, we can laugh at this person for eating what was actually meant to be dog food, but also when you're being told you can have anything that's in the fridge and you see meat patties. Now, personally, I'm someone who has that constant anxiety of coming across as a a-hole who takes advantage of others' hospitality, so I would immediately question and be like, hey, can I eat these patties? Is this okay, or are they for something else? But of course, not everyone is as insecure as me. Kinda don't blame the guy for just seeing free food that, again, he's been entitled to having it, and then, yeah, finding out it's not for him. Regardless, though, that is from my side of things. I'm gonna have to say, actually, no a-holes here. I don't think the OP did anything wrong, and I think that the brother-in-law was just abiding by what he was told. For now, though, let's move on to a wonderful tale of a man who planned to use his partner for financial leverage only for it to graciously backfire. You can just tell by the throwaway account name. Am I the a-hole for moving out because I don't want to help my boyfriend out with the rent? My boyfriend's 26 and I'm 24. I have been together for 3 years. We live in New York City and he makes over $200K a year, while I'm studying for my master's in social work and have no income. Right now, I'm doing an unpaid, year-long internship 3 days a week, as well as classes 2 days a week. It's rare to get a paid internship in social work, plus internships are mandatory. I spend 12 hours every day either working, studying, commuting, or in class. My only free days are on weekends, so I have no time for a paid job. My mum helps me financially by paying for my Metro card and healthcare expenses. But everything else, I rely on loans. As you can see, she's in a very flexible position. Before I moved in with my boyfriend, there was a roach infestation in my apartment, so I'd stay over at his place a lot. My lease was ending soon, so he asked me if I wanted to live with him. At first, I joked with him that his living standards would go down since I can't afford a nice place, but he insisted on paying the rent until I finished grad school. Then, we would split the rent based on income. I originally wanted to live in a cheaper place in Queens or Brooklyn, but my boyfriend likes his current place and insisted I move in since he would be the one paying the rent. So, I moved into his $5K a month luxury condo in the city this August. And this is the worst thing, like that sounds like a genuinely smart, well thought out financial plan. But nope, the man has to do a stupid and do this. All of a sudden, my boyfriend recently started asking me to pay half the rent. That's $2.5K a month. I was confused because he was the one who wanted to pay the rent in full. Well, apparently, he was talking to his friends and they all think it's weird that I don't pay rent and that I was a gold digger. I let my boyfriend know that I can't afford $2.5 a month, and he said I was leeching off of him. So, I told him that he should find someone within his social class so he doesn't have to worry about a gold digger like me leeching off of him. I stayed at my friend's place for a few days while figuring out what to do. I called my mum about my situation, and she is willing to help me out, but the maximum she can afford for rent is $800. I found some places in Queens within the price range, less than 15 minutes away from the city and a bus ride away from my school, so I went to check them out a couple of days ago. I've been texting the landlord and my new roommates, and I already signed the lease. I told my boyfriend about my new place, and he got upset and asked me to stay. He said that he was willing to accept $800 a month instead of $2.5K a month, if that's all I can afford. But I told him I don't want him changing his mind again and demanding more money from me in the future. He lived in his condo alone for several years, so it's not like he can't afford to live there without my help. I wouldn't mind splitting rent with him, but I would have to live in a more affordable place outside of Manhattan like I originally wanted. Well, apparently, some of our mutual friends think I'm being unreasonable for moving out instead of talking to him and staying by, paying the amount I can afford in rent, and that I shouldn't have let him pay my portion of the rent. Yeah, of course they wouldn't, because all those people are just like, their lives are their money. They find someone who can't afford things as easily as they can in life as scummy. They don't see your financial issues as a struggle you're going through, they see it as a blight on their image. It's embarrassing to them. It's not something that makes them warrant sympathy towards you, you know? Now, before you hurriedly race down to comment dump him, well, in the update, yes, I did dump him. I blocked him and his idiot friends on everything. My friends also blocked him since he tried to contact me through them. I'm going to enjoy being single and never relying on a man financially ever again. And in case you want the extra information, there's a second update that just talks about the struggles with affordability in New York in general and the issues with trying to find a decent place to rent. The fact that she managed to get with this new landlord through some good connections of cultural background and ethnicity, favoritism. Something about the 80x requirement and 40x rent rule, I'm not sure about that, but if you happen to know down in the comments, feel free to add it to us all so we can all be enlightened. It also does turn out that she did have a job for some while she was studying, but now with her master's degree, it's obviously become far too hard for her to keep a job with the responsibility and requirements of this degree. And finally, yes, my ex does make that much money. It's New York City. He's been in the workforce for 5 years, and people here make more money than they would in whatever town you're from, especially in his field. It was initially shocking to me that someone with just a bachelor's could earn that much while contributing absolutely nothing to society, but that's life. Anyway, over to the top comment here. Around he fricked, and out he found. Nata. Oops. So since I'm the top comment, I suppose I'm gonna actually add an opinion. It is refreshing to see someone just up and say, nope, that ain't gonna work, and then promptly exit the cruddy situation and take care of things. I mean, the audacity to suddenly demand a cool 2.5K after you had an agreement, knowing you had previously suggested moving somewhere affordable, and he insisted because his friends hurt his ego while grossly insulting you, makes him seem weak-willed, thin-skinned, self-centered, kind of manipulative, and a terrible negotiator. Because now he's sat home alone with his sad face on that his girlfriend left. Plus, he's got no chance of getting a bit of rent for the place he probably can't afford, and no chance of lording it over you anymore, which it seemed like he might have been inclined to do. Talk about a backfiring plan. Some would like to wonder, though, if there was anything you were trying to contribute substantially other than just money, which is a fair thing to ask and point out, but I think we also need to consider here that both in your early 20s, she is at least still pursuing something that is very arguably more worthwhile. So I don't think you could blame her for not exactly being able to do anything more than just be around as a loving partner while she's trying to focus her time and energy on the studies. After all, they did agree that once she is actually in the workforce, she can easily contribute based on their income averages. Because yeah, a lot of people seem to be latching onto that gold digger mindset here. Someone with personal experience asks, well, my current girlfriend did something very similar. That grace period with free rent I offered to her was meant to bridge the first few months after the move in together, but she insisted it was to mean forever, which was a great conversation starter, and, well, ender. So, how long did it take him to tell you that you owe him $2.50 a month? Well, if you actually read it, he said he'd pay rent until OP finished grad school. Shockingly, she did not finish in October. More breaking news at 10. But yeah, as you go further down, it becomes more of a very accusatory fest. Just because she said something about not wanting to rely on a man, it seems to have triggered a lot of people.
But if I can't keep you financially, how am I gonna make you like you? Through my personality? Ugh.
Anyway, we'll end today's stories there. Thank you, as always, for watching. Feel free to leave any comments you have, and I'll read them as I'm on the loo. For now, though, you be good, love your faces, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.